Hello, hello, hello. Give me 1 second, guys. Guys, make sure this. Okay. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Let's Talk About It Tuesday. For those of you that are not familiar with me, I am Ms. Empower. 1 second. Just want to make sure I can see comments. And I want to welcome you to Let's Talk About It Tuesday. We have a really good topic tonight that I thought was a really great one and much needed, and it is blending parenting. So I know you're probably thinking, well, I don't have a blended family. Well, this is still for you if you are a parent. It doesn't matter if both parents are in the home together because you still are blending parenting styles. You may not have the same parenting style. So tonight, I just wanted to dive in and just have a quick conversation about blending parenting because it's so important that we look at our parenting, as a whole, not just individually. But first, we do have to look at it individually. So when two parents live separately, that's blending parenting. When two parents live together, that's still blending parenting. When one or both have remarried or dating someone, seriously. 1 second, guys. Having a problem with my computer. Then that's also blending parenting. So how are you guys doing tonight? Before I jump in, I want to give people an opportunity to log on and join me tonight. Let me know if you're having any problems technically. You may inbox me. If you have my number, you can text me. So I'm really hoping that everybody takes the opportunity to get on tonight, and let's jump into this discussion. If you're watching this as a replay, please feel free to make comments. If you're watching me on YouTube, I thank you for joining me on YouTube, and make sure that you like and share and subscribe if you have not subscribed already. If you're watching me via Facebook, I thank you for joining me tonight live on Facebook. Please like and share as well. I am so thankful as always to log on and have a great conversation with you guys on Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I always try to pick topics that I think that affects our community, and it's something that's much needed to talk about. So, tonight, as I said before, we're talking about blending parenting. It's so important, guys, that we think about our parenting. So before you started having children and you met your person that you're deciding to eventually have children with, did you guys sit down and talk about what your parenting style was? Did you talk about what parenting meant to you? Or did you just have a child? Or was it just important that you guys have children? A lot of times we put those other thoughts on the back end. We don't think about what the parents' parenting style is. What they think about parenting. What does it mean to them? It's important to know. So for me, when we talk about parenting, it's the process, of that prepares your child for independence, because our children at some point are going to be independent and on their own, and you want to know that you put everything in them that was needed for them to go on in life. And when they start having children, they're going to pass that down to the next generation. So if you think about how you were parented, and how you felt about that, and what changes that you wish that your parent would have made when parenting you. You should definitely want to think about that when you're parenting your children. Don't continue that cycle if it was not a great cycle. I am always transparent on my social media. One second, guys. Sorry. I don't know why, but I can't see comments on um, Facebook. But okay, so I'm going to keep going. But I'm always transparent about the way that I parented. So I started out, of course, you're really loving and everything, when they're babies, but when they start getting to the stage of getting into things, um, how are you then, And for me, I was the parent that raised their voice a lot because I felt like I had to do that in order for them to listen and do what it was that I wanted them to do. Um, and as time went on, as they became older, I started realizing that that was not necessarily the best way because a child could just get used to hearing you yell and they're just not paying attention to you and what you're saying. They're not taking in whatever it is that you want them to take in, because they're used to it. It's just like if you're beating a child all the time, they're just used to that. And whatever it is that whatever the reason is you're beating them for, they're not knowing what that is. They just know that you are, physically abusing them. When you are just yelling all the time, that's verbal abuse, and, I wish, and you know what, guys, I just realized I don't have my lights on. I am so sorry. Give me 1 second. Like it should be 1 second. I absolutely apologize for that, but I was like, something is different. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I didn't put my lights on. Okay, so let me keep going with that. So yeah, it's really important to think about how you talk to your children, because you want them to receive whatever it is that you are saying to them. It's very imperative that you take the time to think about that. So I just thought talking about um, blending parenting was a great topic because we have to look at ourselves individually in order to look at ourselves as a whole. What are we putting into our children? So one parent is parenting one way, another parent is parenting another way, and it's imperative that you guys sit down and talk about it so that you are making sure that your child is getting the best parenting that they can get to survive in this world, and to pass on to the different generations, after them. And that is what is important. So, of course, when I had my first child when I was 19, I didn't think about that. Those are not the things that were in my mind, in my head. That was not my thought process. I was excited, about bringing, because I knew that I was having a girl. I knew before I had the ultrasound that I was having a girl. Um, and I was excited about bringing this young girl here, and I was looking forward to combing her hair and dressing her up and, those type of things. And that is what I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about my parenting style. Like, that just was something I wasn't thinking about. So I think it's a good thing to talk to our people who have not started having children yet. So I do try to reach our younger adults out here in their 20s and their 30s, so that those are things they can think about. When they start talking about who they want to have children with, let's talk about, who are you having a child with? What is their personality not being a parent? What is their personality when there's pressure on them? How do they treat you? How do they treat other people? How do they treat their siblings? How do they treat their nieces and nephews? Their parents? Those are things that we should be absolutely looking at, because if, let's think about it now, if you grew up in a household where you were being abused, or your potential partner who you're going to have a child with grew up in that type of home, and they carry that out, even though that hurt them as a child, but they carry it out as well. It's like a cycle, a vicious cycle that keeps on giving. Is that what you would want for your child? Take the time to sit down and have conversations with people, and that's why it's so important to push therapy, because if you grew up in that type of home and you eventually want a family, you need to work through these different things as soon as you can before having children. Because when you start having children and you already don't have it together, that's more damage that you could be doing to your child and their future. So for me, I had a parent that yelled all the time, and whooped all the time. And then I had a parent that was very loving, affectionate, didn't raise their voice unless it was needed. So when we think about putting those two together, what happens? It's like, when you look at the parent that was very loud and it's a hard topic sometimes, y'all, but I have to be transparent because I have to help people. But that whooped all the time, and never listened or any of those things, then that's damage that's done to that child, But then you have the parent over here that is loving, and they try to make up for what is being done over here, but that's still not a balance, because I grew up and started raising my kids in that same manner, thinking that that is what needed to be done in order for them to listen to me. Because even though I had the parent that was that way, I listened to them out of fear, and you don't necessarily want your child just to listen to you because they fear you. You want them to listen because you're saying something that's very important that you need them to know, and that's why it's important to have conversations, healthy conversations with your children. It's important to pay attention to what is done in front of them with the parents. Like, the two parents in some type of way have to come together, work together to raise a productive and good citizen. So, one second, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. And so, I wanted to talk about the different parenting styles. Before I jump into that, though, just want to go back just a little bit, to say, take the time to think about who you're having a child with. So often it's just the act of sex, and then there's a child that's coming, and then if we look at people who get married, who date and get married, sometimes maybe they may talk about what they want for the child, But I don't necessarily think that everybody takes the time to talk about what their parenting style would be. And then maybe sometimes you don't know until you get in it, but it's important to pay attention to the characteristics of the person that you are looking to have a child with. Parenting is so much more than just having a child, because there are so many things that you need to teach them. You want them to have good character, and it's not just going to be what you tell them they should be. You have to be the role model and show them these things. So, as I always say, I'm transparent. So, with me, it took me a while because, I started out, married and raising children, but, you know, something happened that shifted our whole family dynamic, and I was raising children by myself. And I felt like if I didn't raise my voice, they wouldn't hear me and they would run over me. So I didn't want that, and I was very stern. I was very protective. So I had a lot of structure in my home because I never wanted the phone call to come get my child from prison, come see my child, to identify their body. So those things were in my head. I was always on guard and protecting my children in the best way that I felt like I could. I didn't have parenting classes, or I didn't have someone sitting down with me talking to me about how to raise them in a healthy manner, but I had people in my ear, saying, well, don't let your son do that, or you're not hard enough on your son, or he should be out here doing this and that, but nobody sat down and had the healthy conversations with me. It was the discipline part, which I had no problem in disciplining my children when it was needed, but you can't raise every child the same way, because not every child is the same. You know what I'm saying? I'm hoping that parents out here will know what I mean when I say that. You may parent one child one way, and then you may parent another child another way. But I don't know if that makes sense to you, but every child is different, so you can't do everything the same. But my parenting style was the same for all of them, but it was just the way I went about certain things with each individual one. So, let's talk about the parenting styles really, really quick. So we have four. We have authoritative, and that is being high in controlling structure and high on the affection side. So for me, I was high on the controlling structure. I wasn't very high on the affection side all the time. And this is what I will say, you know, it sometimes really depends on what is going on in the parent's life, because sometimes the parent is not there 100% because they are dealing with something else outside of the parenting, and it takes effect in the parenting, because they're going through that. So I wasn't high on the affection side. I have really grown in that area. I want to say it took me a while, but not to say I was never affectionate, but I always was focused on what I thought was best for them to keep them safe and protected. I always talk about how I had my oldest child at the age of 19, and I worked really hard at pouring into her and her sister, and my son, not to do what I did. So I kind of bled onto them, and I've talked about this in previous videos. because I didn't want what I did to be what they did. I didn't want them to walk in my shoes. I wanted them to be better than me. So I tried different things to keep them more structured and on task and keep them focused and not to make my mistakes. Um, which meant I never hid things from them. I let them see that this is what happens when you make decisions that may not be the right decisions, at the time. But I have no regrets because I thank God for all three of my children because I don't know where I would be without them today. Um, and they're my everything. So that was just something that I wanted to say really quickly, though. But so the authoritative side is, the authoritative parenting style is high on controlling structure and high on affection. Um, which can be really good because they have structure, but then they're getting the affection that they need and they don't look outside for that. They don't um, feel like, when this person says, I love you to them, they feel like, oh, let me go over here and do whatever it is that they want because they said, I love you, and I don't get that at home. It's very important that we are giving them everything that they need in the home. Um, and then our second parenting style is permissive. And that's the parenting style where the parent wants to be the friend. I probably have said, I don't even know how many times I've said this to my children. I am not none of your friends, so do not talk to me like that. And that's exactly how I said it. And it might not sound like the appropriate thing to say, but I've said it. It's like, no, that's not what you get ready to do here. That's not what we're doing. No, you know. And so, these parents, they set limits or maybe they put them on punishment, but then they take them off. They don't stick to it. And so when they grow up feeling entitled to everything and feeling like somebody owes them something. And because they were never told no, they were allowed to do whatever because the parent did whatever they could to keep the peace in the home, and not have the child mad at them. I don't know if you've ever seen a family out and the child just walks up and hits the parent or kicks the parent. That is a permissive parent. They have allowed them to do these things at home. So in public, it means nothing, for them to do that. And then we have the negligent parent style. And that's where they're not involved. The parent is not involved. They've abandoned the child, and we don't really know what those reasons are. It could be anything, any reason, sometimes the relationship didn't work out with the parent. Maybe the child was conceived with someone who that parent didn't really know for real, and it was like a one-night stand. And maybe that other person was married, so they choose not to be a part. I mean, it could be a whole lot of different scenarios for that. But that's really bad on the child because they grow up feeling abandoned, and it makes it hard for them to have friendships, relationships. They always seek love, from people. And so they'll do what they can for that person because they want to show them love and they won't receive it back, in a lot of cases. And they are continued hurt throughout life because of being abandoned, in their younger days. And that's a lot. And then we have the authoritarian, which is the parent that says my way or the highway, and I used to be her, it was my way or the highway. I didn't listen, because I felt like, okay, I'm the parent, and that's just how I felt in those moments when they were young. Like, I'm the parent, like, you're not going to tell me, I'm going to tell you what it's going to be, and this is what it's going to be. And guess what? If I could go back and do that all over again, I just feel like I would have done it so much more different with the information and education that I have now. Um, I feel like when you do that, your child is feeling like they are not getting affection. They're not able to be heard. And sometimes those children they grow up and they have anxiety, you know, because they were never able to say the things that they needed to say, and it took me years to start listening, saying, you know what, I'm going to listen. And I think I might have shared this in a video before where I had one of my children to say, Mom, sometimes you act like you're all the way up here, and I'm all the way down here. And when they said it, they didn't say it in a disrespectful way, but I got it. And I was like, you know what? They're right, and I'm going to work on that. And with parenting, patience is needed, and if you're a patient, then you are giving that to your child. They're going to know how to be patient because they've been watching you. It's not that you told them you need to be patient, because you could tell somebody they need to be something, but if they have never seen it, they can't be that because they don't have an example of that. Which makes me want to talk about, like, what are some of the characteristics that you would want your child to have as they grow up and go into adulthood. And I made a list of some that has to be taught, but it has to be taught because they are seeing you do this, not because you told them to do something. And so the first one is mutual respect. So if your child sees that you are getting along with their parent and their parent's spouse or their parent's significant other, and you are respectful to both of them, you are showing them when, that time comes, how to be respectful, mutually, how to work towards that, how to just be that, because that is what they're seeing. Because a lot of times when families blend because of both parents not being together and they move on with someone else, it's a lot that comes with that. So let's look at some. So I have an example from a few weeks back. I did a video on fathers, and I talked about, actually it's the first part and I still have to come back and do the second part, but we just talked about, what the importance of a father was for a child. And I had a person to come on and talk about how their father was in prison most of their life, and they still had a relationship. They still talked with them. They were able to visit. And the father told them to be respectful to their mom and to be respectful to her partner, and be open to having a relationship with the partner. And I said that was a grand thing that the father did, because it's not so often that happens. Sometimes they'll be like, you know what, that ain't your dad, so he shouldn't be saying nothing to you. And, and that's why I say it's important to have mutual respect for each other. Sit down, have conversations when you decide, okay, I met this person, they're going to be in my life, and I think we should sit down and have conversation, because you don't know what parenting style that person is bringing either. But you all should sit down and have conversation and, know how to deal with one another, for the sake of this child, and it don't necessarily have to be for the sake of the child, but just period. Because it's really unnecessary for your child to see the back and forth, the disrespect, and the disrespect going to the significant other, in front of them. And so that makes them be disrespectful towards the significant other sometimes. It makes them not be able to form a relationship when they should be able to, because they're going to be spending a lot of time. Um, and then when we start talking about the parents living in a household together because they're married, or maybe they just live together and raising the child, you know, you're going to sometimes have to compromise on how you guys are going to do something when it comes down to the child, you know. And the last thing you want to do is let the child see that you are being disrespectful to each other. Like, you don't want to do that in front of the child, but you do want the child to see that you guys are having conversations. You can have a disagreement and it be healthy, you know, and you just talk through these things and why you want to do this. Because what happens is, if the child sees that you guys are against each other all the time, then they will play you against each other. And then that kind of hurts what could be poured into the child. You know, you're showing them how to be. So, so as I said, the first one was mutual. You want to make sure that they, you know, are mutually respectful, you know, and then you want them to know what affection is, you know. You want to show them that so they know what it is and they know how to receive it. You know, they know when they're not receiving it. You want to show them love. You want to teach them that love is just not saying I love you, but love is how you treat that person. You know, it is being respectful to that person, being honest with that person, you know, learning how to listen, how to compromise, you know, and so many other things. Another thing is listening skills. You want to teach them listening skills. So that means you have to take the time to listen to them so that they know what it means to listen and not overtalk people. Because I know I'm still working on that as a grown up. Just listening to the whole conversation, even if it's something you feel like, oh, I want to interject because no, that's not true. Hold your comment, but really listen to what this person is saying, because they could be apologizing in what they're saying to you, but you wouldn't have heard it because you're so focused on them stop talking so you can jump in and say something. And you want to teach your child to know how to listen. They need listening skills. You want to teach your children patience, but you don't want to teach them how to be passive, you know, because passive and patience are different. But a lot of times people make it seem like it's the same, and it's not. Because when you're passive, you're letting something continue going on that shouldn't be going on. And then eventually you're going to be passive aggressive, and that's not good. Because that can turn really ugly, and that's not what you're teaching. You're teaching patience. And so you have to be patient with your child. I remember I did not possess patience until I started being caregiver for my mother. And once I started taking care of her, I had these patients that I'd never had before. And I was like, if I could have patience while I'm taking care of her, I can have patience with my kids, you know. I can listen to them. This is when all this started to come about for me, you know. And many of you probably have never heard my story, but I had started praying the same year my mom had, was it the same year she passed? No, it was prior to her passing. I had started praying because I was, you know, kind of tired of being in an angry state all the time and just wondering why I was that way, you know. And so God just started showing me and showing me why I was the way that I was. And then I wanted to work on it. And so he started to really work with me on being a better person. And so in caring for my mom, those patients came about. You know, I had to have them instantly, you know. And the same year my mom passed, my grandmother passed like 2 months before her, maybe not a full 2 months. And I really, really dived into being a better person, because I was like, what if I died and I I didn't work on these things. I didn't change 100%, you know. And so that made me want to change and be a better person. So I share with my children, but even though I've shared with them, they've come to me and said, Mom, I see this change in you. Like, you seem happier. You seem nicer, you know. And so I didn't have to necessarily go to them and say, you know what, I may showed them, you know, and after they said it, then I could give them my testimony and tell them how it started so that they can see it can happen. You know, if there are things about you that you notice that you want to change, you can do these things. Um, and then you want them to have conflict resolution, you know, married couples, you know all about this. You know, people that are living together, you know, people in dating, in relationships, you have to know about conflict resolution because it's important to have these skills to work through things, you know, because people always talk about how hard marriage is. Marriage is a beautiful thing, you know, but you have to have a partner that is really willing to be all in and work through things, you know, because you're two different people. Things are going to come up that you don't agree about. There are going to be conflicts that come up, and you have to be able to talk about them without it turning into a drag out um, session, you know, where there's cussing and there's fighting and, you know, unnecessary, unhealthy things happening, you know. So if your children are seeing that you are resolving things, like they saw you disagreed about something, you know, but it wasn't to the point where you were cussing, you know, your partner out, you know, they're seeing that it can be done without this. It can be done without the fighting, you know, and not just in front of the kids, but behind the scenes. These are things you should be working towards. Um, You also want them to compromise in the most healthy way. You don't want them to be one just to compromise all the time and their partner not compromise. Like, or their friend not compromise. Like, they are always the one that compromises and the other person does. You don't want to teach them that. You want to teach them how to compromise in a healthy way. And that's where the conflict resolution comes in at, and the respect, the mutual respect. You want them to be able to have healthy disagreements, like we talked about. You want them to know how to be honest. So if you're in the car and the kids are in the car with you, and somebody calls, you're supposed to be going to their house, and you guys just got in the car, and they say, oh, where are you? And you say, oh, I'm around the corner. But you haven't even left the house yet. You haven't even turned the car on. All the kids have not necessarily got in the car yet. Or maybe you haven't even left out the garage. You know, it's that simple. You know, be honest about that. Say, hey, me and the kids are getting in the car now. You know, we're on our way. Be honest about that. You know, because if they see you lying in that way, you know, or maybe you don't want to talk to somebody on the phone and tell them I'm not here. You're teaching them how not to be honest. You know, and it starts small and it gets big. So teach them honesty. Empathy. They have to know how to be empathetic towards people. They really do, because they're going to want somebody to be empathetic towards them. Teach them how to treat people in a manner that they would want to be treated. And we can kind of talk about that at a later date too, though, because sometimes what you want, somebody else might not want. But I'm just saying, teach them how to be empathetic. Teach them how to have intimate relationships, you know, and how to be kind, you know, how to be the most kind person that they can be, how to work on that, and teach them how to be open, you know. Don't allow them to be so closed off. You know, if you can teach them that by example, Like for me, my kids know that I'm very open. When they are talking to me, I'm open with them about different things that I feel that would help them. Even if it was something that I didn't really want to share with somebody, I would share with them if I think it's going to help. You know, so it's a great thing to be able to raise children and have some great characteristics. If there are some characteristics that you want to put, oh, I didn't even have this on comments. If you want to put in the comments, you are more than welcome to do that. I will come back and respond if a response is needed. And you never know who's reading the comments. Okay, just looking at the time, seeing what I have left here. So tonight's conversation was on blending parenting. It's so important. It's not just about people who are not together any longer and are parenting. This is about people who are parenting, period. You could be married in the house together and parenting, because you're going to still possibly have two different parenting styles, and you have to figure out through compromise, how are we going to parent our kids? What is the best way for our children? Because each child is different, so you may have to do things differently. But these are healthy conversations that you want to sit down and have. And you definitely, if you have not started having children yet, make sure you know for a fact that this is a person that you would want to parent with. What are their characteristics? How were they raised? What did they see? Are they working on themselves? How are they under pressure? Take the time to look at those different things. So I hope that you were able to watch, even if you're single and you haven't had children yet, because these are things that you want to think about. Parenting is just not having a kid, getting together and having a kid. It's so much more that goes with parenting. And we have to be aware of that before we become parents. It's a lot, and you really want to make sure that you are working on yourself, that if there are some things you're dealing with from childhood, go get the necessary help and talk to someone, so that you can work through these things. And when that time comes, you're a little more prepared. It doesn't hurt to take parenting classes. It doesn't hurt to do the research on parenting. Now, let me say this. They could never write a book for real. And I'm sure there are books out there about parenting. But you're not going to know until your child gets here. But there are things about you that you need to work on so that you're not bringing that into your parenting. So I have enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you did too. I hope that you got something from it. And let me say this. There are people out here that are stepping in as parents, like aunties, uncles, cousins, friends, and these are things that you should think about as well. What is your parenting style? What are you pouring into this child that you are playing a role in? We have godparents out there, just those of you that are out here and are taking care of a child. We have people who are CASAs. They go in and help with the young people during the time of them being taken from their families. What are you pouring into these children? It's important that you are focused on that, and that you're not letting what has happened to you in the past predict or make the decisions on how you're parenting. Unless it's in a positive manner. If it's something negative, you don't want that. So, guys, with that being said, I thank you guys for joining me for Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I do have a new segment that is coming out. I don't have the official date yet because I am still working on a few things. I'm not going to release the name yet either, but you will see the flyer. It will be a video. I will not go live with this particular segment until I get my views up and I see that people are really interested. So, with that being said, guys, this was Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I am Ms. Empower. I look forward to talking with you guys again on next week. Have a great rest of your week.